This year is our 25th anniversary celebration for New River Gorge National River. In 1978, Congress passed an act creating or establishing New River Gorge National River from Hinton, or just below Hinton, West Virginia to Fayetteville. This festival that we're doing for the 25th is recreating an event that happened in 1869 when Collis P. Huntington, then a railroad type baron, financed or became the financier of the C&O Railroad. He came to the Hinton area in 1869 July, and with a group of gentlemen, a surveying party, hired a Batteau crew out of the Hinton area to take him and his party downstream to Hawk's Nest.
The echoes of driving home that last spike in the Great Transcontinental Railroad had hardly died before I was called on in my office by a delegation from the Chesapeake and Ohio Railway. And it had long been the dream of people to link the James River and the Ohio River. So in keeping with some of my associates in the railroad, I resolved that I would personally inspect the proposed right-of-way. I set off with Generals Eccles, Ewing, and Wickham. We rode the train as far as White Sulphur Springs, which is as far as the track went at the time. We then proceeded by horseback here to Hinton Ferry. And here we resolved we would go on down the river by Batteau. We asked around who might be able to take us on such a trip. So we ended up dealing with a couple of Hinton brothers, Joe and William.
One of those boatmen, William Hinton, provided his recollection of the experience in an article which was published in the Hinton Daily News in 1925. Here are some of those excerpts from that article.
Shortly after the Civil War ended, there was strong talk of the C&O Railroad being built westward from White Sulphur, the point which it extends to. In July 1869, C.P. Huntington and 10 other gentlemen came to Hinton's Ferry, General Eccles, General Wickham, and General Ewing being in the crowd. They were looking over the proposed route for the new extension of the C&O and said they wanted to hire someone to run them to Hawk's Nest in a boat. They wanted to know if we knew the river. We told them we didn't, but we knew how to run a boat. Some of them said it was no use to hire us as we didn't know the river. Others said they wanted to hire us and take the chances. Well, they hired me, Joe Hinton, and Parker Atkins, and gave us $2.50 a day, which we gladly accepted. We left Hinton's Ferry about 3 o'clock and landed on Sandstone Falls that evening. We went down to Old Sally Richmond's and stayed all night. Next morning, John and Tuck Richmond joined us. We cut skid poles, pushed our boat over the falls. This took us about 3 hours. After having gotten safely over the falls, we all got aboard and floated on down the river. John Richmond took the front steering oar, I took the stern, and we were off for Hawk's Nest. We had rough sailing some places. The water flew high enough to hit me on the head, and I was standing up in the boat. We landed that evening at Bowers Ferry, now called Sewell. We camped on a sandbar, drank fine whiskey, and ate catfish half-cooked. The party had some of the finest whiskey that you ever stuck a tooth in. They gave us small drinks and far between, which was probably the most sensible thing they could have done. Parker Atkins said it was the little drinks and a long time between drinks, but that which he did get did him a sight of good. The next morning we still had 11 miles to go to reach Hawk's Nest, over the most dangerous parts of the river. At the bad places we had to get out and make a survey of the water before we ran through. We landed at Hawk's Nest about 2 o'clock, tied our boat, and were paid off. We then had to walk home. a distance of not less than 50 miles. We reached home the third day, tired out and with sore feet, but we felt good with a few dollars in our pockets. If anyone disputes this account of our trip down the river, I can prove it by Joe Hinton and Tuck Richmond.
To bring the Batteau era to life, the National Park Service enlisted the expertise of the Virginia Canals and Navigation Society, an organization of volunteers who work to preserve and enhance Virginia's rich inland waterway heritage. In 2003, these Batteau enthusiasts trailered their 40-foot-long boats to West Virginia, donned their period costumes, and helped the National Park Service choreograph a Batteau Festival as one of many events celebrating the 25th anniversary of New River Gorge National River. A total of 4 boats came: the Admiral, the Anthony Rucker, the Fluvanna, and the Rose of Nelson. The crews provided historic encampments, demonstrated how the boats required frequent repairs, and talked with visitors about operating these unique vessels. The Rose of Nelson was the Batteau used to recreate the Collis P. Huntington journey of 1869. Let's meet some of these folks, starting with the captain of the Rose of Nelson, Mike Neal.
The Rose of Nelson is part of we're members of the Virginia Canal and Navigation Society, and underneath that is the James River Batteau Festival. And there are about 16 Batteau that are registered, James River Batteaus. And on my crew, I have 2 other members from other boats. One is another captain. And we have 2 members of our crew from Taiwan and Thailand. And I also have 2 other of my employees that like it, and they're from Mexico. So we have an international little Batteau.
I am Pete Hodges. I'm one of the co-captains of the Admiral, and I'm the grumpy captain. My job is to try to keep our boat going downriver, keep our crew and our boat safe with the least amount of effort on our part. And so we try to use the river as much as possible, utilize it and work with it rather than against it. Doesn't always work, and I take all the blame if it screws up. A Batteau is a really long boat, and it's narrow, and we use a pocket knife to help train people when we put them on the sweeps. And the sweeper on the front of the boat and the sweeper on the back of the boat have 2 different jobs. And if you look at my hand and my fingers are forming the current, then you want to keep the boat lined up in the current. The man on the front, his job is to find a hole big enough for the front of the boat to go through. And he tries to sweep over and get the front of the boat lined up with that hole, and the guy on the back has to make sure the rest of the boat goes through the same hole.
To run the front sweep, as far as I'm concerned, the front sweep man is most important. He has to make the first decision on how far down the river we're going to make this turn, or what are we going to get into. And he also has to spot whether you can get over this rock or up near it, or sweep over the side of it, and make sure you keep a straight line to get to your destination, which is downstream.
Yesterday, our Batteau came across Sandstone Falls on the far left side of the river, dropped it over about a 5-foot ledge into a pool, and then we parked it there last night and set up a historical encampment. This morning was the work part of the 25th anniversary Batteau Festival, where we portaged the 40-foot boat around the falls. It was about a half-a-mile trip. The Richmond brothers, William and Daniel, brought their Belgian horse team down and their oxen team to pull the Batteau.
Somebody grab on that side, let's pull that way.
Get a little roller under there to slide it on?
Put a couple rolls on that side. 10 feet, that's 10 feet.
We used wood log rollers to roll it across as the Belgians pulled it up out of the river into the roadway and down the roadway and then around the falls back to the river where you can see it set up now. It was interesting. You know, it went a lot better than we thought it would. Historically, they had a chute built on the same side of the river we brought the boat across, except they could slide it down, and then there's a mill race on the other side of the island here. Of course, the Batteau's made of wood, mostly oak, poplar, and pine. And if you don't keep between the boards, the cracks between the boards caulked, then they use an oakum to fill the cracks, and then what they're doing now is patching, because the boat's been in the river for a day. It's come over some hard rock ledges, so some of the oakum has worked itself out, and that allows the boat to leak. So we're taking time here to patch the boat, put more oakum back in, tighten up the oakum that's there to stop the boat from leaking before we put it back in the water.
Okay. The James River Batteau is a patented design. Was invented back in the 1770s by brothers Anthony and Benjamin Rucker. They lived in Nelson County, Virginia. It was a very ingenious design. The boat was designed to flex both front to back as well as side to side, so that not only when you can scrape over rocks, but also it handles well in like the big waves here. A rigid boat would just, when you drop into a trough, would just plow right into the wave. Whereas the Batteau, because they'll flex front to back, when the front drops in and hits the bottom of the trough, it'll actually level off and start coming back up a little bit while the rear end is coming down. So it's almost, you know, like a snake. The way it'll, you know, you can have a big bow in the middle of the boat like that, and that works well in the Piedmont rivers like the James River and Rivanna rivers where I'm from.
It's gone really well. To start with, we were a little weary of what we were going to come into, and we just kind of took the easy side of the waves and kind of skirted the big ones. But then as the day progressed, just today, we started going into the bigger stuff, and by the end of the day we had actually found some really impressive waves that actually did a little damage to our boat, and so we're doing repairs tonight.
Yeah, Batteaus were the freight boats on whitewater. They were the whitewater freight boats, essentially. We dug up examples of James River Batteaus in Richmond in the 1980s, and they were all very flat on top, just like Rose of Nelson, and all of these other boats out here. So when all these boats were invited to come out and run the new river, they were cautioned to put some extra woodwork on the ends, at least the bow, so they would not swamp as they went down through the rapids. And that's what they've done out here. In our time, nobody's found a wreck for us to go study and look at the detailed architecture of one of the New River Batteaus. And that would be great if somebody could find a fragment of a boat, and we'd see if it was like the style that we think it is. Nobody's seen one. And nobody's found a boat wreck out here to tell us, but now they'll know people are interested in this, and I'm sure they'll crawl around and eventually come to us or the Park Service or Historical Society and say, we found a boat wreck. Go out and look at it.
Batteaus to the New River, that was really the first type of transportation, large-scale transportation on the New River that carried cargo. Before the Batteau came, it was your dugout or your small canoe that, or your ferry that came just back and forth across the river until the area became settled enough in the early 1800s to where you had crops needing to go to market, lumber being sawed that needed to get out to the railroad. So without railroads up and down the river yet, Batteaus were needed to transport those goods to and from market. Once the railroad came in 1873, it really ended Batteauing from Hinton's downstream. But of course, there's a section of the river that has no railroad on it. It's still pretty primitive, and that's Bluestone Lake area today. So Batteaus were used up until the 1920s and 30s from Hinton upstream into Virginia to bring goods and people and timber, especially tannin bark, from that area of the New River to the railroad markets in Hinton.
Although the 2003 historical reenactment didn't make it to Hawks Nest because of high water, the 2 weekends of the Batteau Festival were intended to showcase the colorful history of the Batteau era on the New River. This event was successful in demonstrating what these boats looked like, how they were used for exploration, transportation, and commerce on the New River.
I want to be a Batteau bellboy.
I want to be a Batteau bellboy.
That's the only way they'll let me stay.
That's the only way they'll let me stay.
I want to be a Batteau crewman.
I want to be a Batteau crewman.
I want to pole and pole all day.
I want to pole and pole all day.
I want to be a Batteau crewman.
I want to be a Batteau crewman.
Work real hard and get no pay.
Work real hard and get no pay.
I want to be a Batteau maiden.
I want to be a Batteau maiden.
I like a drink that's ice cold.
I like a drink that's ice cold.
I want to be a Batteau maiden.
I want to be a Batteau maiden.
When they get tired, they make us pole.
When they get tired, they make us pole.
I'm just a mean old Batteau captain.
You're just a mean old Batteau captain.
A cuss and a fuss and a yell all day.
You cuss and you fuss and you yell all day.
The crew wants a brand new Batteau captain.
We want a brand new Batteau captain.
One that'll let them fish and play.
One that'll let us fish and play.